Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
Today on Spotlight, a boat that graced the silver screen in renowned films where it is now. Plus, Missouri is making their own footprint as quality distillers. Hear the story of a fourth-generation family. Then how small businesses are building and preserving the community on Cherokee Street. And now a response system for first responders that helps them recognize the special medical needs of patients. It's Sunday, and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
911, what's your emergency?
Hi, my name's Miss Smith at 643 Elm Street. I have a 2-year-old with me right now, and she has a tracheostomy, and it's clogged, and I can't get it out.
Okay, ma'am, we have units responding. Is your child part of the Special Needs Tracking and Awareness Resource?
Yeah.
What number is she?
246.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Help is on the way. Medic 1, Engine 1, respond. 643 Elm Street, 2-year-old female, respiratory distress, tracheostomy issue. This is STARS child number 246, timeout 0930.
STARS is an acronym for Special Needs Tracking and Awareness Response System. It was something that was developed as just a community project. The intent at the time, was for it to stay at the ambulance district I was working at, because when we started out, I didn't know what we'd uncovered. All we did really is I took children with complex medical needs, built an emergency plan for them.
The main form is really focused on what is the most basic information you need to know to get through this emergency that you're driving to right now. And then we have a lot of specialty information in the background that they can access through attachments.
Emergency services in general, and especially in pediatrics, works off what we like to call recipe-type algorithms. Like, you see a kid that presents with ABC, they fall within these vital signs, you treat with 1, 2, 3. We want to find the kids where that treatment of 1, 2, 3 is not only probably not going to be effective, it could cause harm. So that's a big part of STARS, is managing. We need to somehow know via 911 dispatch that these are the kids we're going on, and we can flag them in the home. But the issue with that also is that our kids travel. So we just numbered the kids individually and then talked to 911 dispatch. They house the emergency plans as well. Then when EMS was dispatched on these kids, they were told, for example, be advised you're responding on star 7002.
Once they hear that number, then they'll access the information for that kid. Traditionally or previously, that used to be, binders with sheets of paper, and that turns out that model worked as well as it could in the beginning, but there's a lot of holes in that model, and so then it kind of went to PDFs on iPads, and then we developed the first iteration of the database. The first time I saw the technology piece, it was just mind-blowing. The idea that maybe we could leverage technology to fix this big, huge problem in EMS, which up until now, everybody was just sort of like, yeah, it's a problem. We don't really know what we're going to do about it. We'll just keep on going. And just the idea that, no, that's actually a really severe problem. That's something we should try to find a solution to.
When we started out in Rock Township Ambulance District in Arnold, Missouri, I was on number 14. So I call those first 14 my originals, because number 14 was the last one I physically enrolled myself. Now we have 503 active in our database between Missouri and Illinois. Children on home ventilators is a big one.
I have the notoriety of running the first ventilator STARS call that was ever run in the system. We were responding at night in the rain. It was pouring down rain. I'm trying to read the notes on this kid who lived 3 minutes from the house, so I'm directing my partner and trying to get through it. And we pulled up to the house. Mom and home health nurse were having a disagreement in the front driveway. And I just remember being able to be like, well, that's weird. And I walked right past them, and I walked into a bedroom that looked like an ICU. None of it surprised me. Like, I knew all of it was coming. I knew that I could talk directly to that patient. I knew how that patient typically presented, and I was able to just start treating the patient.
One of our tracheostomy kids, he's been doing really well, but he has a particularly complex airway. He's a great, I like to call any kid a scenario, but he's a great training scenario to use examples of you don't know what you're doing, because he always shocks everybody when we use his example. This is a problem that's not going away. In fact, it's only growing. So our kids, we're saving more kids than ever.
Hospitals couldn't always talk to the EMS providers, and parents didn't feel comfortable sometimes talking to the EMS providers, and we provide this way where we can all discuss potential situations, the best way to get through them, and I would really like to see that model spread. I think that we have found something amazing here.
As soon as Nick and I think we've seen it all, I say, oh my gosh, I can't. Have you ever heard of this? No, I've never heard of this. I can't handle this kid. I have to turn over to this specialist. So we think it's just going to serve kids best if there is one program nationally for these sick kids traveling that everybody in the emergency world is familiar with.
I think the sky's the limit. I would think we can spread state by state and hopefully be a national program someday.
For more St. Louis stories, subscribe to the HEC YouTube channel. Spotlight STL from HEC Media. History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jody Sowell, President of the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis, and this is History Spotlight. A boat by many names, including the River Queen, served many roles, transforming from a freight hauler to a cherished tourist attraction, and even gracing the silver screen in renowned films. Public historian Adam Clappy tells the story and reveals how it found its demise in St. Louis.
When the steamboat River Queen arrived in St. Louis in June of 1964, her owners, John Groffel and Arthur Credo, had big dreams. Ever since they had first purchased the stern-wheel steamer at auction in 1961, they had hoped that the boat would bring them big dollars as a nostalgic tourist attraction. But in just 3 short years, those dreams would end up at the bottom of the river. But before we get to the sinking, a little history. The Howard Shipyards and Dock Company of Jeffersonville, Indiana, built the River Queen in 1923, but when she was constructed, she had a different name, the Cape Girardeau, and she operated mostly carrying passengers and freight on the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. Then, in 1935, she was sold and got a different name, the Gordon C. Green. As the Gordon C. Green, she operated as a tourist boat, mainly on the Ohio River, though she also operated some on the Mississippi, particularly during annual trips to Mardi Gras in New Orleans. She became a movie star as well, appearing in 3 films, most notably 1939's Gone with the Wind. But just because the Gordon C. Green was a movie star didn't mean her career was going well. By 1951, she was out of service, and in 1952 she was sold again. Over the next decade or so, she'd undergo several name changes as different owners attempted to make the ship into a popular tourist attraction, restaurant, or nightclub in places like Owensboro, Kentucky, and Bradenton, Florida. Finally, in 1961, now going by the name River Queen, the steamer was sold to John Groffel and Arthur Credo, who had plans to fix her up and turn her into a nostalgia-themed restaurant, museum, and gift shop. At first, they moored the River Queen in Hannibal, hoping to draw tourist crowds. They found early success, but they also knew an even bigger tourist market was just 100 miles downriver. So, in June of 1964, they had the River Queen towed to St. Louis. They moored her near the Eads Bridge, and advertisements called out to tourists by promising that the River Queen would give them a nostalgic taste of 19th century steamboat life. Tourists could get lunch or dinner in her 185-seat dining room, and her kitchen offered everything from shrimp to catfish to steak. For the next few years, everything seemed to be going well. The River Queen was bringing in money, and the restaurant was well regarded. But disaster struck in the early morning hours of December 2nd, 1967. That morning, the restaurant manager noticed the boat listing in the water. Luckily, no one else was on board. Groffel and Credo arrived shortly thereafter and could only watch as the waters rose over the second deck. The River Queen was sunk. To this day, no one knows why. The ship was scrapped, but parts of her steel hull can still be seen on the riverfront when the water is low. Instead of nostalgia for the past, her rusted hull offers us a reminder of how dangerous and powerful the river remains.
Next on History Spotlight, how the Hill neighborhood played a large role in the appearance of St. Louis.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. Mid-America Emmys, Tellys, NATOAs, Auroras, and other awards. HEC Media has been bringing home the hardware for over a decade. Hundreds of nominations and wins, from regional to international levels. Arts and education to author talks, magazine shows and documentaries, individual craft achievements to overall excellence, plus so much more. And although doing good work is its own reward, recognition, well, it's nice too. See what all the fuss is about. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
I like old things. I have antiques everywhere. Now that I'm 80, I am one, and I like to save as many things as possible. And I want to preserve whiskey making.
The whiskey being made in this 1950s milk barn in the country hills outside Jefferson City, Missouri, will age for months in these barrels before it's ready to drink. But its recipe and story are much older.
My family made alcohol all of our lives. The corn whiskey is the recipe that my family made back before Prohibition.
That's Mike as a kid next to his dad, Michael Broker Sr., a blacksmith who also ran a sawmill in Frankenstein, Missouri. Like many in those days, Michael Broker and his wife Anna made just about everything they consumed,
We had heard the stories about Grandpa distilling,
including whiskey, a recipe Mike Jr. jotted down before it was lost to time.
I said, I want to get this recorded because my bucket list, I want to make the family recipe one time before I die.
A successful one time eventually led to Mike and his children opening a craft distillery named for the family patriarch.
I wanted to pay homage to our blacksmith grandfather.
Just 2 years after its opening, the Show Me State is recognizing Blacksmith Distillery's heritage as part of its 200th birthday celebration. It licensed Blacksmith's whiskey as a bicentennial bourbon, saluting Missouri's long tradition of distilling.
It's a part of our history. It's a part of who we are as a state. That's something I've learned during the bicentennial is the history of a lot of these distilleries, and I love learning the family history too and kind of their stories that they have, because it's not all about the bourbon, it's about the stories of how they got there and how these bottles came to be and what's in them and how they as a family got excited about it and how they started.
Missouri has about 30 craft distilleries, many with historic roots, on its Spirits Expedition Trail, a trail just like you would see in Kentucky or Tennessee. But that's not the only thing Missouri now shares with those states when it comes to whiskey.
The Missouri legislature passed a law in 2019 for classifying Missouri bourbon whiskey, and the steps distillers have to take to get that Missouri bourbon label are arguably the strictest in the country.
It's all made in Missouri. As the components of the bill is that all the corn has to be bought from Missouri farmers, and all the white oak barrels need to be bought from Missouri producers. So that's what makes us very unique.
No other place has corn and barrel origin requirements, and Representative Jeff Porter, who sponsored the bill, hopes that will set Missouri bourbon apart from its competitors.
We have all the components here, so let's just make our own footprint. Let's go forward and show what Missouri distillers can do.
It's a recipe that my family made before Prohibition. I won't say whether it's made it during Prohibition.
And we have some great distillery people. They have their own stories, and that's what makes us very unique. And I like the stories of each one.
We're, 2.5 years old now and having a blast and love telling our story.
For Missouri's craft distillers and Blacksmith Distillery in particular,
Favorite part of the whole process?
Right here. I can't stop myself from reading the backstory. We are a fourth generation family with roots in Frankenstein, Missouri. Yes, really, Frankenstein.
It seems to be a story that has many more chapters to be written.
You know, if you can do something, the same thing that your ancestors did 100 years ago, 200 years ago, that's pretty cool.
Later on Spotlight, a man fascinated by music from 120 years ago.
About a century ago, Cherokee Street emerged as a shopping destination for St. Louisans. Electric streetcars shuttled patrons into the South City neighborhood's mile-long strip of shoe stores, bakeries, and jewelers, all of which sat nestled in with big names like JCPenney and Woolworth. But as people began to move out of the city and into the suburbs, so did the big-name stores that had provided an anchor for Cherokee's business district. Empty storefronts and a reputation for crime settled in for several decades, but the neighborhood's eclectic nature and impressive diversity also remained. Today, Cherokee Street boasts a thriving small business community, 90% of which are owned by minorities. And near the corner of Cherokee and Jefferson, a new anchor has emerged. But it's not a big box store. It's a deep reverence for building and preserving community.
I've always said that Cherokee Street feels like Sesame Street because you're going to see someone that you know coming in and out of a store. You're going to see someone crossing the crosswalk. Sometimes you don't remember how you met a person because you see them so often. One day you start up a conversation and then 7 years has passed.
A familiar face is so comforting. I discovered that over the pandemic because I seen how people were starting to utilize the space because they ultimately were stuck at the house, but they knew that they could come here and we would end up having conversations for hours.
There's a lot of good camaraderie, and we all really have a love, like a deep love for each other.
Butter Love is a newer addition to Cherokee Street, but creator and owner LaCrosia Wilderness is not. She had been living in the neighborhood for years, making skincare products in her kitchen. Inspired by the ingredients that her parents had given her to heal her own intensely dry skin, LaCrosia's creations can be found in stores all over the US, Canada, and France. When a building that provided space for her to make and sell product became available on the street that she already loved, LaCrosia decided to use the grand opening to celebrate not just her own achievements, but also those in the neighborhood who had provided so much support.
This community is so inviting and so loving and nurturing that I want it to not just be, money being made for Butter Love. I want the whole community to make money. So we had Hop Shop that's on the corner make specialty Butter Love cocktails. Aloha, who owns Black Coffee down the street at the Luminary, I wanted her to come sell her black lemonade. The Master Pizza popped up and made heart-shaped pizzas for everybody. So that was a big piece for me. Like, I want my peoples there with me. I'm about to cry.
I call the Noir Bookshop a concept bookstore, the concept being the African American experience. And so this store is designed to mimic my paternal grandparents' home.
The Noir Bookshop exclusively carries titles written by Black and Brown authors and features a take one, leave one library, rare finds that the public can interact with in store, and books for sale that range from vintage to current bestsellers. Owner Imani Wentz started out her career as a journalist, and in 2014 was an intern for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch when the call came in that Michael Brown had been killed.
And so I got to see firsthand the reporting of what was going on in Ferguson in the very first days. And then when I returned to Mizzou, fall of 2015, when students protested against the university system, seeing young people my age really stop going for the status quo and standing up for what they believed in and fighting against racial inequality and police brutality. It was experiences like that once I started creating my bookstore, I just thought about what would my bookstore's role have been if it existed.
But before it existed, Imani had a true Sesame Street moment on Cherokee Street. Just a couple of doors down from the Noir Bookshop sits Profield Reserve. The clothing boutique and design shop had developed a reputation for being an unofficial networking and support site for creatives. Owner and designer Christopher welcomed artists, musicians, and entrepreneurs to utilize his space to promote their work, including Imani.
I asked if I could borrow his store for the weekend and turn it into a bookstore. And it was because of that event. It was packed, so many people came, and I generated enough revenue to sign the lease for this space 3 days later. But he did that consistently. He probably hosted over 15 to 20 different individuals. He really gave a lot of people the creative freedom to sort of launch.
I just knew the importance of, I had the space, and I knew there wasn't a lot of places in the city that were open up to the space to the people that I saw coming through the door. And the people that were coming through the door, to me, were the most talented people in the city, but very overlooked. So when I was provided the opportunity to throw a pro-field event inside of a very traditional art gallery that's known all over the city, immediately I was like, I'm going to go access art from the people that I know deserve space on a wall. Throwing Together We Ball was like a really big, like, monumental thing for me.
One thing about Chris, he is a visionary, and he is such a visionary, and he puts so much energy into the community that people see and they want to work with him, and they want to be a part of whatever he's cultivating. So when he created Together We Ball, he knew it was going to be big.
There were people there, that was the first time showing, first time they sold a piece of artwork. There were people there that came to the show that had never been to an art show and had bought their first piece of artwork.
The best thing about this event is that we have artists like Basil Kincaid and Damon Davis that show at Art Basel, and then we have artists here who have never even printed artwork before. It just shows that St. Louis is a community where you can have access.
I think he just wanted to, like, create a space for everybody to be celebrated.
Together We Ball wasn't just an art show, but a celebration of all of those who owned businesses, shopped, or made their home in the Cherokee Street community. Food, drink, artists, and music represented the neighborhood's rich variety of talent, and all the people who had supported each other through the hard, lean times were able to savor a night highlighting their success and resilience.
So this street is the only street in St. Louis that 90% of the businesses here are minority, Black-owned businesses. To have a space, to have a street is very important, and everybody here is for the same cause, for the same reason. We're for the community, by the community.
I definitely think Cherokee Street has a huge opportunity to, like, shape a really cool, like, shopping district. I really do. And even just a space for, like, the community to keep growing.
We try to figure out how we can do events together and how we can bring more people to the street and how we can make this a vibe for everybody.
HEC has been bringing you positive programming and award-winning content for decades. Arts, education, culture, in-depth discussions, films, and more. All in one place, hecmedia.org.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Though he is only in his 20s, T.J. Muller has been fascinated by music from the 1920s since he was a boy.
I can remember my mum singing the tune Babyface to me. Let's see. Babyface, you've got the cutest little, that one.
I'm up in heaven when I'm in your warm embrace.
It is no coincidence that Babyface is in the repertoire of the Arcadia Dance Orchestra, because its founder, conductor, musical director, cornet player, and star crooner are all T.J. Muller.
I felt that it would be incredibly fun to try and put together a group that could, as authentically as possible, recreate that music with the ambition of having a 11-piece orchestra playing regularly in St. Louis, playing the exact same sort of music and repertoire that you could expect to hear in St. Louis if you were to travel back in time.
TJ named his orchestra for the Arcadia Ballroom in Midtown St. Louis, which later became a bowling alley and eventually a parking lot after old-timey jazz went out of fashion. But TJ's affection for it has never faded.
The 1920s to me just represents a fascinating time in musical advancement in America, in artistic advancement, and and creativeness. We were moving out of the old world and into the new.
You may have detected by now, TJ is not from St. Louis. He grew up in England, playing music starting at the age of 5. And then one day, when he was 20, he met a band leader touring the UK who happened to be in need of a trumpet player. His name was Pokey Lafarge, and TJ went on to tour with Pokey's St. Louis-based band for 3 years. And that is how TJ fell in love with St. Louis. Today, he lives on the South Side, working out of a living room that looks a little bit like a TGI Fridays.
There's something about the underdog, isn't there, which is always interesting. And I think St. Louis has always been an underdog in terms of the narrative of music history.
TJ began promoting the city's musical heritage first with the group called the Gaslight Squares, and now with the Arcadia Dance Orchestra. At some of their performances, people really do dance.
Ultimately, there's a selfish reason for why I put this all together as well. It's because I wanted to play in an orchestra, and no other orchestra would hire me, so I had to put my own together.
Though TJ had very little formal music training, he met and has been mentored by local jazz legend Bill Mason, still playing his cornet at age 90. And with the help of this old book, TJ learned to transcribe tunes from old records and rearrange old charts to fit the sound of his orchestra. He even built a few instruments to help recreate that 1920s sound.
I'm trying to make that music more and more specific to St. Louis as well. I'm trying to add tunes which I have strong evidence that St. Louis bands were regularly performing and playing, and furthermore trying to find tunes composed by St. Louisans.
That last song was Ozark Mountain Blues, recorded in 1929 by the Missourians. The Missourians did start right here in St. Louis. If somebody had an afternoon snack in St. Louis, I'm going to claim them.
The Arcadia Dance Orchestra, happy days really are here again. Thanks to all those old songs about tootsies and moochers and sweethearts that really did rhyme, moon, spoon, and June. You know, music with sax appeal.
It can totally transcend age groups. It's quite special. It happened, and it's not being remembered. And I think that it deserves to be remembered. I'll see how far I can push it before I fly too close to the sun.
Next week, bringing St. Louis together on 314 Day, how you can celebrate. Plus, a hotel that's been in St. Louis for over 100 years, the Chase Park Plaza. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.